You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up. You got to pump it up, don't you know? Pump it up.
Pump it up, Chris. Pump it up, man.
It's happening, man. I mean, it just feels like we're close now. It feels like football is here. I mean, Matt Kirby's excited. Dude, in just over a month, a little over a month, Trent, we're going to be back in the big house for a nightcap against Fresno State. I don't care that it's Fresno State. You know, it'd be nice.
My only problem is it's a night game. That's the only problem I have with the whole situation.
I know you don't like the night games. You're kind of like I know you're only 30, but you're kind of like an old man in that way.
Dude,
like
I'm old, man.
You like to get to bed by 8 p.m. is kind of like the ceiling for you, and then you want to get to bed, and you're a responsible guy, so I understand that. But yeah, what is it like? Kick off at 7:30 or something like that?
7:30, man.
I don't know, man. There's always something special about being in the big house under the lights, and I think being able to open the season that way. And again, it's Fresno State, but Fresno State, I mean, Trent, you pointed this out. They're not a scrub team. You know, they've got some guys down there. They did have the recent coaching change, so we'll see what kind of impact that has on Fresno State. But again, man, football season is here. We just went through Big Ten media days. We've got media availability with some of the assistants tomorrow, and so it is here. Fall camp kicks off this week. Just a lot of good stuff happening. We got a lot of topics to cover tonight. A ton of topics we got to cover, Trent. I saw somebody bring it up in when I announced that we were going to go live tonight. Somebody brought it up about the whole Connor Stallions thing and some of the trending news. We'll end up talking about that a little bit. We're going to save that for the end of the show. I put out an article this week about the potential of a 2-quarterback system this season that I thought could be helpful for Michigan. Got a ton of pushback on that. Trent is ready to battle beyond that belief for a good portion of the show. So that's all stuff that we're going to get to. But before we get to that, I want to cover Big Ten Media Days because that was a big part of what happened last week. And before we get into that, what we're going to do is we're going to bring Trent. This is the first time I think we've done this since you and I linked up and started doing a show together. We are going to bring a third guy onto the show to talk about Big Ten Media Days with us a little bit. You guys here are probably a little bit familiar with him because the last time he was on the show, he was actually covering Michigan State. So go easy on this guy. Our friend Matt Lounsbury is back in the house. Matt, welcome to the show. Excited to have you here. I mentioned already that the last time you were on, you were covering Michigan State. And to be honest, the people in the comments were not very friendly towards you. And so full disclosure, Matt is a lifelong Michigan Wolverines fan. You know, he took an opportunity professionally to be able to continue covering college football, and that just happened to be with Michigan State. Look, he did his job well. He, didn't necessarily enjoy having to cover that team, but like I said, he did his job well, paid his dues, and now he's back on the Michigan beat. We're super happy to have him, and he was one of the guys that we had down in Indy for Big Ten Media Day. So, Matt, is there anything you want to open with? Any statement you want to give to the people? Any apologies you want to issue before we get into this thing?
I apologize for absolutely nothing. No, I'm glad to be on this side of the rivalry again. Yeah, bad start there, right? But no, I'm glad to be on this side of the rivalry again, covering the Michigan Wolverines with you guys. Believe it or not, I did enjoy the last 2.5 years covering Michigan State. It was still Big Ten football, but definitely excited to be back at Ann Arbor. I actually did do some freelance covering Michigan before my time with Michigan State. So flip-flop back and forth a little bit, but that the heart never flipped back and forth. It was just professionally. So
yeah, I was going to say, at heart, you're a Michigan guy, right? That's never changed with you. And I mean, I don't know how much time we've spent talking about this, at least among the three of us and with Trent and I, but I couldn't do it. I could not cover a team like Michigan State. You might as well be asking me to go cover Ohio State. I hate them so much that I think it would override any sort of professional sense that I have about me. I'm not that professional of a guy anyway, but you asked me to cover a team that I hate, and I don't know that I could provide good coverage. So appreciate, Matt, your time over there, and certainly happy to have you back over on the good side of things. So let's get into Big Ten Media Days, because what I want to do is, there was a lot that happened down in Indy, and you guys were obviously there firsthand. Before we get to that, I just want to say I was supposed to be there with these guys. I was very excited to go meet with the team and, celebrate. We're back with Sports Illustrated, and we've put together one hell of a month here, by the way. And shout out to all the readers out there and all the people that have, helped us do numbers with our content. Everything is off to a great start. And I haven't been around these guys in person since we kicked off this new adventure. So I was really excited to get down to Indy. Got in my car, I left at 5 a.m. On Thursday morning, driving down, got about an hour and a half away from Ann Arbor, just inside of some sort of redneck hillbilly-ish town in Ohio. Blew a tire in my car, had to limp it off the highway. That really took a good portion of my day. So I ended up covering Big Ten Media Days remotely on Thursday. But Trent, you were down in Indy. Matt, you were down in Indy. Let's have Matt kick it off. What were some of the things that, because you were there for all 3 days, Trent, you were just there for Thursday. Matt, you were there for all 3 days. What were some of the things I think that stood out to you the most about being down there and sort of taking in, what the new look Big Ten Conference is all about?
Yeah, so like the big thing for me when I went down there was I wanted to know what the vibe around Ohio State was, just because they brought a lot of guys back from last year's team. I figured they would come in be feeling confident. But if you remember back a couple years ago, Chris, in 2022, I think that was both of our first media days. It was right after Michigan had first beaten Ohio State for the first time in a decade, and I think you and I both talked about it. Like there was this arrogance amongst Ohio State about how 2022 they were going to get the rivalry back. It was all of the excuses. It was the snow. It was the fact that they had the flu. A lot of arrogance out of Ohio State. Fast forward to last year. All right. A lot of that arrogance was all of a sudden gone because then Michigan had beat them again in Columbus. And so there was a little bit more of a muted attitude around Ohio State. So I was really curious what the attitude was going to be this year. I think it was somewhere in between those two. It wasn't as arrogant as it was in 2022. It wasn't as muted as it was last year, but there was a lot of confidence. I think some of that turned into hubris a little bit with some of the things that Ryan Day said on the XM radio and things like that. So that was like my big thing was, what are they going to be like? They're definitely confident about this year's team. They're anxious to get back to get Michigan back in their place, and so that was like one of my big takeaways. Is that's what their mindset was at for going into this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question about it that a lot of those guys look at people. Bobby's like, "Who the hell is this guy?" A lot of people asking questions about who you are, Matt. They'll find out. Go back to the beginning. We introduced him. Don't let the appearance fool you. He's a decent guy. Give him a shot. But yeah, I mean, so just to clear things up here, my first Big Ten Media Days was heading into the 2021 season. And I remember that one specifically because I remember that speech, that statement that Jim Harbaugh made where, he gave that do it or die trying speech. And I think that was really the thing that set the tone for the Michigan football program and what was to come. And since he gave that speech, Michigan 3-0 against Ohio State, three straight Big Ten championships, and then obviously 3 trips to the college football playoff, a national championship in 2023. So, but I agree with you, Matt, that was something that I noticed. Ohio State, obviously a lot of those veteran guys, they were asked repeatedly, what was the determining factor? What made you decide to want to come back to Ohio State for another season? And a lot of those guys spent a lot of time talking about Michigan. Ryan Day spent a lot of time talking about Michigan during his time at Big Ten Media Day. So that's something I'll elaborate on a little bit more when I sort of get to what my takeaways were. But Trent, I mean, you were down there for Thursday. You went down there to cover Michigan specifically. What stood out to you about what you heard?
There was nothing like real groundbreaking that I felt like was just, we had to report on it right then and there. I mean, there was a lot of coach speak there. There was a lot of, let's talk about that real quick. Let's talk about the Big Ten coaches on Thursday. How about the guy that Chris had absolutely zero idea about going into the process?
True.
Indiana coach Curt Cignetti. That guy, he does not lack any confidence. In fact, he's actually Chris's second favorite coach of all time, I believe, right, Chris?
There's no doubt about it. That might be the biggest news that came out of Big Ten Media Day, that Curt Cignetti is now my second favorite coach, not just in the Big Ten, but in all of college football. I sent a text to Trent immediately. I was like, this guy's like the drunk uncle of college football. Like, he got up on the stage, he just started riffing, going left and right, and this is where the soundbite comes from.
Bullshit.
I mean, the guy said bullshit on the stage. You've got Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti there. Everybody, supposed to be a high caliber, high profile event. And Curt Cignetti gets up there like he's had a few cocktails and just starts talking about, look, you guys think we're going to suck. You think we're not going to do well. I took over a team that was 8-48 before that. And I mean, just an incredible guy. If you didn't hear Curt Cignetti's time at the stage during Big Ten Media Days, go back and watch that. But I told Trent before we went live, I cannot wait to hear the sound bites that comes out of Bloomington this year, because every post-game press I don't think Indiana is going to be very good. I mean, I think that's a 3 or 4 win team. There's probably going to be a lot of losses down there, and I'm sure his post-game press conferences are going to be incredible. So yes, Curt Cignetti certainly stood out to me, and he was so important that he made the soundboard. Trent.
Bullshit.
He was like, I'm not a guy up for predictions, but just so you guys know, every time I took over a team that was X amount bad or whatever, X amount of wins, we end up going and winning the league the next year. So apparently, if you listen to Curt Cignetti, Indiana has a great chance to win the Big Ten next season, even with Michigan, Ohio State, and Oregon in the mix.
Yeah, there's no, and then I see people pointing it out in the comments. Yes, UCLA head coach. What the hell's the guy's name? I know he was the running back. Sean Foster. Look, it happens to the best of us, man. Sometimes we get on here, you're doing a live show or you're in front of people and, you kind of stumble and you're not really sure what you want to say. I did think it was hilarious, though. I mean, he gets up to the microphone. He's like, we're UCLA. That's located in California. It's us and USC. We play football out there. He didn't know. It was like he came with zero preparation for what he was going to say up there. But he said, as he was doing different things throughout the day, he's not a big talker. He's not a big media guy. So I don't think that's necessarily indicative of what type of coach he was. But yes, Matt Kirby, that was certainly a moment that stood out and certainly a moment that got a lot of attention outside of coaches saying wild things or freezing up at the mic. Trent, what about specifically about Michigan? What were some of the things that stood out to you that you're taking away from Big Ten Media Days? Maybe that give you some confidence about this season, or maybe, are putting you in this place where you're like, okay, that's going to be a big question mark during fall camp.
So going into it, one of my big questions I wanted to talk about and ask was about the Michigan secondary. They went out and brought 4 transfers in. Chiron Moore, when he was up at the podium in the individual breakout, he was asked about the corner spot of opposite of Will Johnson. And as of right now, it sounds like Jair Hill is the guy. And I did a preseason depth chart, and I had Amir Hall starting opposite of Will Johnson. He's a bigger corner. He was an FCS All-American. Granted, Chiron Moore hasn't really gotten to see him mix with the Michigan defense yet, but it sounds very promising for a guy like Jair Hill, who's going into his sophomore year. He was a high 4-star recruit. He's got a ton of experience now in the program for being there 1 year, played quite a bit of football too. So Michigan fans, if you were excited about Jair Hill, that's another reason to be.
Yeah, we talked about him, during the spring, his name came up a lot. And I remember seeing him, down on the field. He made a big play. I think it was on Peyton O'Leary. There was a deep ball thrown to O'Leary from maybe, was it Jaden Davis? I think threw the ball.
Yeah, it was Davis.
Jair Hill made a great play on the ball. And he's that guy. I mean, I think he's like 6'2", so he's got the height that you want, but he plays physical. He's scrappy. A lot of the same tendencies you hear about Amir Hall, who transferred in, FCS All-American, who, these guys haven't had the ability to compete. They weren't there for spring ball, so they're going to show up at camp, which again starts this week. And that battle between Jair Hill and Amir Hall, I think, is going to be certainly one to keep your eye on. But they both have those qualities that I think make for a really good corner. The type of guy you don't want to have to line up against all afternoon or all evening. They like to be physical. They're going to get their hands on you. It's just going to be a long day if you're a wide receiver trying to go up against those guys. And to have Jair Hill, a sophomore, a young guy in the program, sort of be that guy that can step in, because there's going to be a void next year. Will Johnson is going to be off to the NFL. He's a surefire first-round pick. They are going to need guys in the secondary, and Michigan certainly went out and supplemented the secondary, and hopefully it'll continue to do well in the future. So I think that's a great point. Was there anything for either one of you guys outside of that relating to Michigan that really stood out to you or caught your eye?
For me, the offensive line, it sounds like 3 positions are kind of cemented in as starters, 3 players. You have Miles Hennet at left tackle. You have Josh Preeb at left guard. You have Gio El-Hadi at right guard. But I kind of was thinking Greg Crippen had that center spot locked up. But according to Chiron Moore, it's a tight race there at center between Raheem Anderson and Crippen. And then over at right tackle, which we kind of already knew, Andrew Gentry and Jeff Percy. A little bit later on, Chiron Moore, after talking about those battles, he did single out Andrew Gentry, just saying how good he is and how he believes he's going to play a big role for Michigan this season. So it sounds like he probably has the head start in that battle at right tackle.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting to get insight on, those position battles and what's happening there. And obviously there was a lot of talk about the quarterbacks, which we'll save that for the other segment in the show. But I think it was, so for me personally, watching it from the television, which again sucked, was really pissed off about that. But I think it did give me the opportunity to maybe, take in information in a little bit of a different way. The first thing that stood out to me was Chiron Moore. When Chiron Moore went to the stage and the speech that he gave and the way that he, sometimes coaches, when they get in that environment, they can avoid the big topics and they just want to make sure they say the right thing and play it safe. Chiron Moore went to the stage and he said, look, nothing has changed here. The goal is to beat the rivals, beat Ohio State, win the Big Ten, go to the playoff, win that. I mean, he was very, very consistent and had this authoritative sense about him. I just felt like he was a guy who looked like he was in command. Didn't look like a guy who was a first-time head coach. It looked like he had been preparing for this moment for quite some time. And I think even in those little moments when you saw him on the main stage and when you saw him in the breakout sessions, you can see why he was the guy. He was the only option Michigan could go with. He has everything you want in a head coach. He's got the personality, but he's also got that fire in him where, I mean, he's a Michigan guy. He is a Michigan man through and through. I mean, there was even some Harbaugh-isms that he threw out there. What did he say? With an enthusiasm unknown to mankind. He threw that in his speech. I mean, this guy has been watching Jim Harbaugh turn this program around over the last 3 seasons. He's seen firsthand what it takes. And anybody who thinks that there's going to be a step back because of the coaching change, I think when you watched Chiron Moore go about his business at Big Ten Media Days, I know at least for me personally, after hearing that and seeing that come from him, I felt a lot better about him. It's not like I didn't feel good about him as the head coach, but just watching him in that environment, I thought he did really, really well. I thought he was shining bright. I mean, you guys have the same sense?
Yeah, I totally did. That was one of my big takeaways too, was just how authoritative that Chiron was and very confident. And he just, he made no qualms about what the goals were for this team this year, laid it right out there. And so that was one of my takeaways as well, was just how this was kind of our first, I mean, we had the introductory press conference with Chiron and things like that. So we got to see it then, but this was really now that he's been on the job for 8 months, how has he grown? I think he's already grown just in the way that he presented that opening statement on stage.
Yeah, Tyrone from the Facebook page, completely agree. Command the room. He had command of the room when he walked up on the stage and started talking like this. This was a leader of men, and so I thought that was real promising to see, reassuring, and not so much reassuring, but reaffirmed everything we already thought about Chiron Moore. The second thing for me, man, was a guy that I can't give enough credit to. He is a rarity in today's college football. And Matt, I think maybe even, all of us put out articles about this guy, but Donovan Edwards. Donovan Edwards, from the time he got on campus to who he is today, has grown and matured, not just who he is on the field and the type of athlete he is there, but the type of man he is, the type of mentality he has, the way that he approaches not just football games, but the way he approaches the locker room. I just could not be any more impressed with this guy. And when I say he's a rarity in college football, in today's college football, it's because you have a 5-star caliber running back who had to wait his first 3 years in college football before he can be the guy. He's now going into his senior year. He's finally getting his opportunity. And what a change in tone it is from him, where last year going into the season, it was, I'm going to be Barry Sanders. I'm going to be Walter Payton. I'm going to be these guys. I'm going to be one of the greatest ever. Today, he finally has his opportunity to be the guy. And he's sitting there talking about, it's not about me. It's about us. It's about the room. It's about all of us. And I'm challenging all of these guys. Somebody else could end up being the starter. It's not about me being the top running back. It's about what we do together. And then obviously he's been very, very open about some of the mental health battles he had to go through over the last year, which, look, man, you go to a Division I, pretty much any locker room, but especially at this level, a lot of alpha male guys in there. They don't want to talk about crying in the locker room. They don't want to talk about mental struggles that they've gone through. And in a lot of ways, I think that's why some people struggle by themselves, because it's not a comfortable thing to talk about. So the fact that he's using his platform to open up about his experience and say, look, I struggled. I went through all of these things, but also it's a test of my character and I didn't give up. He's just a great example, I think, for a lot of, and he said this when he was talking to the media, it's not just young, people my age, you know what I mean? People that battle things, to hear somebody like that talk about that, it goes a long way in letting you know you're not alone. So overall, step back. When I look at Donovan Edwards, the way he presented himself at Big Ten Media Days and everything he's gone through to get to that spot, once again, walked away incredibly impressed with who he is as a player, who he is as a person. Guys, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, for me, that was honestly a big takeaway. And as soon as I got done up there listening to Donovan Edwards, I went back and wrote a story about his journey, what he's been through mentally as a running back in Michigan. One thing that kind of caught my attention was he flat out said against Washington in 2021, he sat in the locker room and cried because he only got 3 or 4 carries. And he said that he believes a lot of people in his situation would have transferred out of Michigan or out of the program when they came in as a 5-star prospect.
What? And wait, hold on a second. What the hell is that noise? What is that?
That's me. Well, that's not me. It's my house. It shouldn't. I didn't even know it was going to happen. Some guy's upstairs fixing our bathroom, and.
Listen. Does this gentleman know that you are in the middle of one of the most highly
He does know I'm on a podcast
shows on Monday night talking about Michigan football? We cannot have a saw in the background. I didn't know what the hell was happening. I thought somebody's life alert was going.
That's upstairs in my bathroom.
All right, we may have to tell that guy to just taper it down here for the next 45 minutes or so, because that was alarming. I was terrified.
Can I finish my thing? Okay, thank you.
Don't ask me. Ask the guy upstairs who's doing construction work in your bathroom.
Matt Kirby's just not a fan. Anyway, so he was saying how a lot of 5-star running backs like himself would have transferred away from the program or from Michigan. And he was basically said that he stayed the course and he believes it's going to pay dividends for him and this year at Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's in agreement, which is weird because earlier this offseason, especially during the spring, Michigan fans are such a weird bunch to me. We were talking about Donovan Edwards, and I distinctly remember, and it wasn't just 1 or 2 or 3 fans, it was a lot of fans on social media. Donovan Edwards ain't him. He ain't the guy. I'd rather have Khalil Mullings. I'd rather have this guy. I'd rather have that guy. They don't I don't know where that mentality comes from, but I think you're right, Trent. He has, in an era where the transfer portal is there, where money is there, NIL opportunities are there. This was a guy, to your point, who was crying in the locker room, who was struggling mentally, and probably could have gone, if we're being honest, could have gone to, 98% of other programs around the country and unquestionably been the starter. And he decided to stay at the University of Michigan. He's talked a lot about that, about what it means to be a Michigan man and what it means to persevere. And I know that a lot of people, think very, very highly of Blake Corum and what he did within the community and how he used his platform. And that is 100% justified. I think Blake Corum deserves all of the fanfare he gets. Donovan Edwards is his own man. He's going about things his own way. And I think the value he's bringing to this community is different from Blake Corum because, again, he's his own man. But I just think to overlook this guy, I think is a huge mistake. I think everybody on this panel is in agreement that assuming the offensive line can be as good as we think it can be, Donovan Edwards is on the verge of having an incredible year. And it's not like he hasn't really been productive through this point in his career. I mean, became a legend against Ohio State, looked really good in the Big Ten championship game 2 years ago when Blake Corum went down with injury. And then in the national championship game, had big plays. In the 2021 Big Ten championship game, as a true freshman, he threw like a 75-yard touchdown pass to Roman Wilson. This guy can do a little bit of everything. He's never had the opportunity to be the guy. Very, very excited to see what he does in that role this season.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the most. What is going on?
I think I just need to point to somebody next to go, because usually that's where Trent just picks up and starts rambling off.
All right, fair enough. I kind of hesitated a little bit, but anyway, we'll keep going here. But lost my train of thought. So the impressive thing about Donovan Edwards is like you said, like when you're an athlete of this caliber, there's a competitiveness that you have to have. And I'm sure it was difficult to sit behind Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum in 2021. And then these last 2 years, even 2022, when Dono kind of broke onto the scene and had a great year, he was still a little bit in Blake's shadow. There was a little bit of not a strange reaction, but like when Blake Corum announced he was coming back for 2023, I think Dono was excited, but like I think part of him was ready to be that RB1 as well. And so then you go through what he kind of went through last year with some of the struggles. The fact that he was frustrated internally, but the fact that never got out to the public and it never became a story, that speaks, and that's a credit to Donovan Edwards and the selflessness that he possesses. And just embracing that team first mindset, that's the mindset that JJ had a lot these last couple of years too, where, JJ had the arm talent and just a natural ability to be the focal point of the offense. Yet he was humble enough to not have to be that. He was still content with where what was asked of him. And so Donovan has really taken that on as well. And that just he exudes that a lot, and he did a lot last week as well.
Yeah, I mean, tremendous leader, not just for the running back room, but I think for the team as a whole. To watch a guy go through that, and you might be a guy that's like, damn, I should be on the field. Damn, I should be playing. I'm this, I'm that, I'm this guy. And then you look at a guy like that, former 5-star prospect who went through it, man. He called it an emotional roller coaster, and here he is now, the feature back for the reigning national champions. And look at everything he's been able to accomplish being a part of this team over the last 3 years. I don't think he'd trade it for anything. I think Donovan Edwards would be the first to tell you that. And he has said it publicly, that everything he's gone through, it's like, I think how did he word it? He said, it hasn't happened to me, it's happened for me. And to have that kind of outlook on life at that age, I mean, I know that Trent and I talk about this often, and I say it on the show, but man, when I was that age, I was an idiot. I was a shithead. I think I had hair at that point, still had a bowl cut. You know what I mean? Like I did not have a good grasp on things. Certainly didn't have that kind of outlook on life. So that's been really cool to see. And again, I'm excited to see what he does this year as the feature running back, but people have said it in the comments. I mean, the beauty about that room is that it's not just Donovan Edwards. It's Donovan Edwards. It's Khalil Mullings. It's Benjamin Hall. It's, Cole Cabana. There's all kinds of guys, Tavi Dunlap, that probably the deepest position group on the roster. And if Michigan wants, and I'm assuming you'll see it, they'll probably cycle through 4 or 5 running backs on a Saturday afternoon. Would not be surprised to see it play out that way. Although I do anticipate that Donovan Edwards is going to get the lion's share of the carries. Let me get to my last point of what stood out to me during Big Ten Media Days. And of course, it's relating to Ohio State. Matt, I think you hit it on this a little bit earlier, but yeah, that stood out to me. It's very, very clear. A couple of things became clear. One, a lot of the veteran guys, all of the veteran guys that chose to come back, came back because they have yet to beat Michigan. Getting their gold pants, having the opportunity to say they got to win against Michigan, that is near the top of their list, in addition to winning a national championship. But there's no question that the inability to beat Michigan over the last 3 years is something that contributed to what the roster looks like now. The other thing that stuck out to me is that Ryan Day will never be able to escape the dark cloud of Michigan until he takes care of business. He spent way more time in Indy talking about Michigan than I'm sure he would have preferred to. And it was just interesting to hear his perception on sort of how things went. I know he had that what was it, a CBS or a Sirius podcast where he was talking about, like, we should have won, and went down the litany of things as to why things should have been different, but ultimately they weren't. But either way you cut it, Ryan Day is continuously asked about the Michigan problem, and that's nothing that's going to go away. And I think when you read into that and when you look at it, what it says to me is that, sure, you have a 56-8 overall record. That's phenomenal. Can you beat Michigan? Can you get that done? And if you can't get that done as the head coach at Ohio State, you're probably not going to last very long. I think Ryan Day maybe is getting a little more of a longer leash than some, same thing with, Jim Harbaugh got a longer leash than I think most coaches would have gotten at the university, like a Brady Hoke, right? Like some of the previous coaches, because he had sort of a history with the program. Ryan Day, part of Urban Meyer's staff, he had that history with the program. And so I think his leash is a little bit longer, but we talk about this every single time on the show. And I think Big Ten Media Days highlighted it even more. Ryan Day absolutely has to beat Michigan on November 30th. If he doesn't get that done, anything short of winning a national championship, I see a very realistic possibility that he is not the head coach in Columbus the following season. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, like I've said before, like as much as Michigan fans, even some Ohio State fans can't stand Ryan Day, the dude's not an idiot. Like, he knows how to coach football, and he also knows that he's got to beat Michigan. Matt and I were talking about this on Thursday while we were there, and it feels like all of the pressure this year is on Ryan Day's shoulders, on Ohio State's shoulders. I mean, yeah, obviously Michigan, you want to go in there and win a fourth straight game against Ohio State. But the reality is, if Ryan Day doesn't beat Michigan, he's more than likely going to lose his job, I think. And I think a lot of people agree with me on that. And just the fact that they have so much pressure on their shoulders this season.
Yeah, no doubt. And here's the shitty part about the whole thing, right? Because I keep saying November 30th. He's got to get it done on November 30th. But with the way the divisions are, or lack of divisions, I should say, and with the expanded college football playoff, like, this is another thing I was going to talk to you guys about. How much does November 30th actually matter? Right? Because if let's say Michigan and Ohio State, we already know they're going to meet the following week in Indy. Like, doesn't that game hold a higher importance than November 30th? What if the two meet in the college football playoff? Wouldn't that game hold a higher importance than anything that happened before that? So it's weird, because I think we're still conditioned that everything rides on that final game in November. That's going to decide your season. That decides whether or not you play for a conference championship. That decides whether or not you have the opportunity to play for a national championship. The reality is, under the current format, you can lose that game, still be able to play for a conference championship, and still be able to play for a national championship. So let me flip that back to you guys. Are we making too much over November 30th and the importance there? Or regardless, because that game is played in Columbus in the Horseshoe, and that'll be the first time the two teams have met since the last time Ohio State lost, does it still carry the same level of significance and quite honestly, consequence if he doesn't get it done?
For me, I think the game matters with the circumstances surrounding it. Like what you just said, if you go into the game and Ohio State and Michigan will play in the Big Ten championship, to me, obviously you want to beat Ohio State. Ohio State wants to beat Michigan on November 30th. But the bottom line is, whoever wins in the Big Ten championship game, that fan base, that team has all the bragging rights. That game before, I don't think it's going to mean a whole lot. So I believe that while yes, it has some sort of a meaning to it. But at the end of the day, if we know that Michigan and Ohio State are going to face off again the following week, I just don't think the game is the game anymore on that Saturday in November.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Trent laid it out perfectly. If going into that game, we know it's going to be a rematch the following week, it does take something away from that first meeting. It's unfortunate. It's part of the conference realignment and the 12-team playoff that I don't like. It's that some of these regular season games, the significance is going to be taken out of them, which is unfortunate. But on the flip side, if one of those teams needs to win that game in order to get to the conference championship game, that's when that value is right there where it's always been. So it's just going to depend on what the situation is going in.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with what you said, Matt, and that's my thinking on it as well, is that it just, for as much as I like where college football is at right now, and the appeal of a 12-team playoff and having on-site, first-round playoff games, to me, that's like something very exciting. But the idea that final game in November might not carry much of any significance other than a symbolic victory, there's just something about that absolutely does not sit right with me. And I think CJ makes a good point from the Facebook page. He says Ohio State can't lose another one at home. The other games are going to be neutral site, and we understand that, I guess, unless there's some wacky circumstance where they would meet in the first round, but I don't even know if that's possible without digging into it. But overall, I think the point is right, that yes, under normal circumstances, maybe that final game in November wouldn't carry as much weight. But if you're Ryan Day and you're Ohio State and you've had the kind of offseason you've had in the transfer portal, on the recruiting trail, all the NIL dollars you've spent to build up a team, not just capable of beating Michigan, but winning a national championship, if you get to week 12 and you lose that game in your own building, before you even get to what's coming next, your seat's warm already. Just imagine what the commentary is going to look like around Ryan Day. And then at that point, it is, regardless of what happens, you have to win it all. You got to go and win it all, because if you lose to Michigan at home, regardless of what you do in the playoff, if you don't bring home a national championship, now it is another year of losing to Michigan, another year of not winning a national championship. And it all occurred when you arguably had the best roster you've ever had since being there, which most Ohio State fans will tell you they have now, which is weird to me because Ohio State has been immensely talented over the previous 3 years, but apparently this is the best team that Ohio State has assembled. So we have a Buckeye fan joining us in here. I had his comment up earlier, but he said under no circumstances will Ryan Day be fired, regardless of what happens. Maybe that's part of the problem down in Columbus, right? I guess maybe there's not so much of an importance on beating Michigan these days. That probably happens when you can't get it done. Let's see here. Let's give him a little bit of shine since we got a rival in there. Have you seen Rutgers and Penn State's schedule? Very easy path to a better record. Okay, that means nothing to me. Never mind. I thought you were going to have some good rivalry banter. I give you the main stage, and that's what you come with. Like, that's disappointing. So anyway, those were my main takeaways from Big Ten Media Days. Donovan Edwards is incredible. He's everything we thought he was. Chiron Moore looks like he is more than ready to lead this team to a high level of success. And unfortunately for Ryan Day, or fortunately if you're Michigan fans, there's nothing he can do to escape the issue with Michigan until he gets it done. And I think there is a ton riding on November 30th, regardless of the lack of divisions, regardless of whether or not they meet in the championship game or the playoffs. That's happening in Columbus. That's in their own building. And the last time the Michigan Wolverines came in there, we know what happened. Ohio State lost by 22, and Michigan took that Block M flag, ran right to the 50-yard line, and planted it in the middle of the Block O. That is something that not just resonated with fans, but if you looked at what the alumni were saying, former players at Ohio State, that never would have happened if we were still there. There is a general sense that Ryan Day just doesn't get it, and that maybe he's not the guy to get it done. And if you go and lose your fourth straight, that's only going to grow. So going to be a very, very interesting afternoon on November 30th. And to be honest, to see what these two teams look like heading into that game, because a lot of people think Michigan, they're going to stumble a couple of times along the way. And for Michigan, at least, that could be a game. Yeah, it's a rivalry game that you want to win, but it also might be your opportunity to get yourself in the playoff. You got to win that game. So overall, I think, Trent, you said it earlier, there wasn't anything, no major sound bites that came out of Big Ten Media Days, nothing we didn't already know other than Kirk Cignetti is incredible, and I can't wait to see what he brings to the table in the conference this season. But Matt, we're going to cut you loose here. We appreciate anything you want to say on the way out, either about Big Ten Media Days, make any sort of statement to the people now that you have. The floor is yours before we get you out of here.
Yeah, no, I'm just really excited to be a part of this team. I appreciate Chris bringing me on, and Trent bringing me on as well. Looking forward to this season. Looking forward to bringing just even more excellent content on Michigan Wolverines on SI. In fact, as I sign off here, I'm going to go get to work on some more content as we head out. So, but appreciate you guys bringing me on.
Look at they're giving some people are giving you a hard. We'll win him over. Matt's a good dude. He's a Michigan guy and he's been working his ass off for the site, and he's a big reason why we've been able to have some success here over the last month. And Matt's actually, our schedule is going to change a little bit in the fall because we've been doing one show. For those who have followed for a while, this during the summer, we typically go to one show because there's just not a lot that's happening. But in season, keep in mind this. You guys are excited that football is coming back. You know what else is coming back? 3 to 4 shows a week is what's coming back. And so Matt's going to play a huge part in that as we sort of work around Trent's schedule. But yeah, Matt, appreciative of you. Glad to have you as part of the team. I think I speak for Trent as well when I say, yeah, we appreciate what you're contributing. We'll get you out of here. And then Trent and I mean, Jesus, I said maybe we'll spend 20 minutes on Big Ten Media Days, and all we did was spend 40 minutes on it. So that's typically how it goes.
Matt Kirby, I have a Michigan jersey. It is right behind me. It's Peppers. It's a signed Chippewa Peppers jersey right behind me.
Back there. All right, Matt, appreciate you. Let's get to the rest of the show here. Trent, I mean, look, we did the 3-way for a little while. I mean, how did it feel for you? Was it a little bit weird at first, or did you get used to it pretty quickly?
I think for the most part we did pretty solid, other than my saw going on behind me, and then I think there was one time that Matt and I neither said anything for like 5 straight seconds. It was kind of an awkward silence, but other than that, it was really good.
Some awkward silence, one very awkward noise coming from your end, but overall incorporating a third person. See, Tyrone understood. Tyrone understood where I was going with the question I was asking you, but I don't even know what the Devil's 3-way is. I don't know. Is that something the younger people know? The older people know? I don't know.
I'm sure they can put a link down in the comments for you to go to.
I don't want an elaboration on the Devil's 3-way. Let's get to the remaining topics of the show here, because at this rate, we're going to go about an hour and a half. So the Big Ten Media Days, we talked about things that we liked, things, I don't really think any of us came out of that with any sort of questions like, maybe that didn't sound very good, or we're a little bit concerned about that. But one of the things that we saw happen last week was that another ESPN analyst, Heather Dinich, came out with her predictions for Michigan's season. She's predicting 3 losses on the regular season schedule. And she's not alone. Most analysts are predicting this as well. In fact, if you go to if you look at the Vegas odds and what some of the early spreads are, Michigan is being picked to lose the same 3 games. And those games are against Texas, against Oregon, and at Ohio State. And so, Trent, I know that right now, look at people are probably going to be pissed off at you, but you're predicting 2 losses for the Wolverines in 2024. What are your thoughts on the idea that they could lose 3 of these games, and what it would mean, I guess, for how people would receive a season like that, right? First of all, tell everybody how you see the season playing out. Where did the 2 losses come from?
Well, I haven't been shy of saying that I think Michigan's going to go 10-2 this season, with losses at home against Oregon and then away at Ohio State. So Heather Dinich predicting 3 losses. I don't think it's completely out of this realm that Michigan, she said that they would lose to Texas as well. And I don't think it's out of this realm that Michigan could slip up in week 2 against a very strong Texas team. And I think Michigan's defense will have to play lights out, which, again, I think they're going to beat Texas, so I think it is going to happen, and I think Michigan's offense will do enough to get the job done. But again, you got Quinn Ewers, you have several offensive threats on that team, that it's not it's not insane to think that Michigan could drop that game. And there's a couple other games on the schedule, if you really want to dive deep into it, that Michigan could drop as well. So yeah, I mean, you can't blame these analysts for thinking that Michigan could lose 2, 3, maybe 4 games this year.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be the general consensus. I think it's 3 games on the season, and then most people are picking Michigan to finish 4th within the conference, behind Ohio State, behind Oregon, and behind even Penn State. And as much as we love Michigan, as much as we're fans, The reality is any sort of fan has to accept that reality, right? That yes, Texas is a losable game. Oregon is a losable game. Ohio State is a losable game. And I even think Washington on the road is a losable game. You got to go across the country into a hostile environment. You got Jed Fish out there. They went out and brought in like 27 guys out of the transfer portal. I know they lost a lot to the NFL, but this is a different type of Washington team. They got that quarterback out of Mississippi State who set a lot of passing records in the SEC. If he catches fire, could be a long evening for the Wolverines, and it sounds like that could be a primetime game. I know that NBC is pushing for that. So, yeah, I mean, the idea that Michigan could stumble and lose 3 games this season, I don't think is out of the realm of possibility. I'm a little more on the optimistic side, right? Like, I think they're going to win that week 2 game against Texas. Oregon is the team that concerns me the most. I think they're going to have the most firepower. Their offensive line is solid, and I think that they're going to give Michigan everything that they can handle. And then when it comes to Ohio State, I'm just not a believer in Ohio State. I think Michigan is going to win that game. So although I only have 1 loss, I'm only predicting 1 loss as of now. The reality is I could easily see it to where it goes to 3, maybe even 4 losses. And a lot of that's going to be dependent on the offense, Trent, because we talk about the defense. I think the defense is a known commodity. You know what you're going to get from the Michigan defense this season. And I think it's going to be difficult for any offense to put up more than, 17 points on this defense? I mean, they would have to take a complete breakdown from a lot of talented guys to give up a lot of points. And I can't remember what it was last year. What did they average? Like 9.5 points per game or something like that. One of the best in the country. And I don't really see any drop off this year. So let me ask you this. Let's say it does come to fruition and the games that Michigan is predicted to lose, at least according to Vegas and according to most analysts, let's say it is a 3-loss season, regular season. You lose to Texas, you lose to Oregon, you lose to Ohio State. 3 losses might not get you into the college football playoff. You'll have to see. You're probably not competing for a conference championship at that point, even though Texas isn't a conference game. How do you think the fans will receive a 3-loss season, particularly to the 3 best teams on the record, Texas, Oregon, Ohio State?
Well, I mean, I would think that in a 12-team playoff, if you lose against Texas, Oregon, Ohio State, who all should make the college football playoff, all should be top 10 teams this season, I think it depends on how you lose them, if it's a competitive game or are you getting blown out. But let's just say that Michigan is competitive. They do lose all 3 games. I mean, I would think that Michigan would get in as the 9, 10, 11 seed, and they would earn their way into trying to defend a national title that way. But again, so let's just say they lose 3 games, and those are the only 3 games, and Michigan takes care of business in the other ones. I mean, the first year under Chiron Moore, you lose J.J. McCarthy and Blake Corum and several other key players. I don't think it's looked at as a terrible season. Obviously, it's not what you want. It's not what Chiron Moore wants in his first season. He obviously wants to win a Big Ten title. He wants to beat Ohio State. But if you kind of take a step back and look at everything, all the losses Michigan had, I don't think it's a terrible season, especially if Michigan would get into the college football playoff.
Yeah, and I honestly, I think that's the distinction right there. And I've actually been working on that story now for about a week, trying to figure out the right way to phrase it. But ultimately, I think Michigan's success boils down to one of 2 things. Now, if you can do both, great. But I think in order for this season to be viewed as success, and Trent, I wonder if you agree with me, Michigan has to do one of 2 things this year. You either have to beat Ohio State or you've got to make the 12-team playoff. If this season goes by without a win against Ohio State and without a playoff appearance, then I think people are going to look at it and say, okay, that, I get that we had some turnover, but we also returned a lot of guys, had a world-class defense, and we couldn't even get ourselves into a 12-team playoff. I just don't think that sets a good tone for year 1 of the Chiron Moore era. Would you agree that that's sort of one of those 2 things need to happen? You either got to beat Ohio State or you got to make the playoff. If you don't have either one of those, it would be hard to view the season as a success.
For the most part, I agree with you, but let's just say that Michigan somehow drops games against Oregon and Texas, and then they lose to Washington and USC. Just throwing that out there.
Sure.
But they beat Ohio State. They go 8-4.
Successful.
Is it though?
8-4, missed the playoffs, but beat Ohio State on November 30th. 100% Michigan fans will take that every day of the week, because that win against Ohio State in Columbus would carry so much weight among this fan base, particularly when they've had to sit back and listen to everything coming out of Columbus. The day of reckoning is coming. You don't have Connor Stallions anymore. Ohio State is loaded up on this. They've loaded up on that. If the Wolverines go in there and beat that ass again in Columbus, I think Michigan fans will sit back. Now, I know there's some of them that will say, yeah, we could go 1-11, and as long as that wins against Ohio State, we'll be happy.
Bullshit.
I call bullshit on that. But I do think an 8-4 season that includes a win over Ohio State, Michigan fans will find a way to be happy about that type of season. You would want it to be better, but you'll take a win over that program and over Ryan Day any day of the week.
See, I would be curious to take a poll and see, would you rather Michigan go 8-4, beat Ohio State, you missed the college football playoff, or would you rather Michigan go 10-2 or 11-1, lose to Ohio State, but you make the college football playoff with a chance to defend the national title?
Yeah, I mean, I think under that scenario, people would prefer the playoff. I think ultimately you want to get in the playoff and you want to give yourself, but you see it right here. Some people are saying, give me 8-4 and beat Ohio State.
My buddy Matt Kirby agrees with the second one.
Matt Kirby agrees with the second one. Big Brother says 8-4, beat Ohio all day. Obviously, yes, we would prefer beat Ohio and make the playoff, but that's not the scenario here. Don't cheat in the comment section. Bobby from the Facebook page says 8-4, beat Ohio State. And so, listen, man, I mean, that's it. Making the playoff is great, but overall, if you don't win the national championship, it's like it's just a thing that you did. And we know how good that cannot feel, right? Because we saw it happen against Georgia. We saw it happen against TCU. You don't necessarily walk away from those seasons feeling great, particularly in 2022 when Ohio State was a field goal away from being able to play for a national championship. And we talked about that before. Michigan did beat Ohio State in 2022. Michigan did win a Big Ten championship in 2022. But if the Buckeyes that season had ultimately been the team raising the national championship trophy, how good would those wins have felt? So there's a lot that goes into this, but overall, I think that one of those two things need to happen. I don't care how it happens. I don't care what the record looks like. You either have to beat Ohio State or you have to be in the playoff. Obviously, fans will happily take a combination of the two, but one of those two things absolutely needs to happen in order for 2024 to be a success. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, and I believe probably, again, I would love to take like a huge poll on this just to see what Michigan fans think, get a ton of people to put input on this. It just feels like with the 12-team playoff, Michigan is a team that honestly should make it every single year. And when you're talking about 12 teams, it feels like Michigan, especially with where it's at right now, you're talking about they made it 2 straight college football playoffs. They just won the whole thing last year. Like, to miss it, it just, I don't know. Like, if it came like that and Michigan missed it, I don't know. I don't know.
It would suck, but if you had the win against Ohio State on your record, it would be an easier offseason. Now, again, Ohio State could go and make some noise in the playoffs and go win it all, and then that regular season game really doesn't mean shit. So, again, there's a lot of factors at play with the expanded playoff, with the elimination of the divisions, and we'll have to see ultimately how that shakes out. But again, you got to beat Ohio State or you got to make the playoff in year one if you're Chiron Moore. I think that's where the situation is. And Trent, as we're nearing an hour here, I think that a lot of the belief that Michigan's going to take a step back. Let me ask you this question before we get into the 2 quarterback system debate. If JJ McCarthy had decided, you know what, I'm coming back for one more year, I'm going to give it one more year in Ann Arbor, how much of a difference would that make for you in terms of how you view this season playing out and where the wins and losses coming from? All things are the same. All things are equal. You lose Jim Harbaugh. You lose everybody else, Zach Zinner, Trevor Keegan, Blake Corum. All those guys are gone. The only difference being JJ says I'm coming back for another year. Does that change how you view the season playing out compared to your prediction now?
Slightly. I would go to 11-1 with either a loss against Oregon or Ohio State. Michigan, they have one of the toughest schedules out there. And it just seems like it would be an almost impossible task to go undefeated once again. But obviously, if you have a quarterback like JJ McCarthy, even if you do lose one game, you have a legit shot to make a serious run in the college football playoff with a quarterback like JJ McCarthy on your roster.
Yeah. So I think it's safe to say that a lot of this belief that there's a step back, that there could be struggles, has to do with the quarterback position, right? And that has been the hot topic for Michigan this entire offseason. What's going on with the quarterback position? The general belief seems to be Alex Orji is entering fall camp as the leader in that race. But there's also a growing belief that Jack Tuttle, this is a guy that's been, he's entering his 7th year of college football. And when you look at his numbers, there's nothing really gaudy about it. There's nothing that really jumps off the stat sheet at you, but he has far more experience in-game experience than any of the other quarterbacks combined. He was also a guy that was voted team captain in his final year with Indiana. But, and Chiron Moore pointed this out at Big Ten Media Days, that the unfortunate thing for Jack Tuttle is that he played behind 2 first-round picks in the 2024 draft, and Michael Penix Jr. and J.J. McCarthy. Michael Penix Jr. was at Indiana, for those who don't remember that. But so the overall point is Jack Tuttle seems to be rising up, the belief that this guy could be the guy that earns the starting quarterback position this fall during fall camp. And I put out an article where I made the suggestion that potentially a 2-quarterback system could work in Ann Arbor. And there's absolutely no doubt about it. I got a lot of blowback. A lot of people were telling me I need to find a new profession, certain things I won't even say on the podcast. Trent, we talked a little bit offline about the 2-quarterback system. I didn't ask you to give me your thoughts on it completely because I wanted to save it for the show. But you saw what I had to say. I don't know if you actually read the article I put out, but
hot garbage. I couldn't.
Bullshit.
I want you to tell me why, convince me that a 2-quarterback system won't work for Michigan this fall.
So I want to start off by saying I think it could if Jack Tuttle is the starting quarterback, because you want to get Alex Orji on the field somehow. They did last year. So, you can kind of say Michigan had a little bit of a 2 QB system last year when you put Alex Orji in the game to run the football. And I believe it would be the same way if Jack Tuttle was the starting quarterback. However, if Alex Orji is the starting quarterback, I don't see any way that a 2 QB system works. I was trying to do a little bit of research. It's hard to even find scenarios where this actually worked other than I found 2. Obviously, you had Florida back in the day when they had Chris Leak and Tim Tebow. And then also Virginia Tech did it one year when they had Mike Glennon and Tyrod Taylor. So the similarities there are you had 2 running quarterbacks in the wings who were high star situations. You had Tim Tebow, who ran the ball a ton, threw some passes, and you had Tyrod Taylor, who also ran the ball. Obviously, Michigan ran it in 2021 with JJ and Cade McNamara. Once again, though, you have a star quarterback in the wings in JJ McCarthy, who could also run the football. I don't see any scenario. You don't have a 5-star freshman banging on the door this year to start. You have Jaden Davis back there, but I don't think he's going to be ready to start this year. You have a 7th-year guy in Jack Tuttle who is somewhat mobile, but he's not like Tim Tebow or Tyrod Taylor. He's not JJ McCarthy either. If you have Alex Orji starting, who can run the football, and he must be good enough to throw the ball if he's starting. I don't see why you'd ever take him out of the game for a guy like Jack Tuttle. I mean, if Jack Tuttle was JJ McCarthy or Tim Tebow, I'd be like, yeah, absolutely. Let's see what happens. But he's not. He's a 7th-year guy who, unfortunately, he was behind Michael Penix and JJ McCarthy, but he hasn't really earned that playing time. He didn't do a whole lot at Indiana when he did have play time. So the quarterbacks that Michigan has on its roster right now, if Alex Orji starts, I don't see any way that a 2 QB system works.
I think you make fair points, Trent. I think you make fair points. And again, I think most people agree with you that a 2-quarterback system doesn't work. Here's why I think it does. In this particular instance, like last season, could you technically call that a 2-quarterback system? I don't know. Alex Orji came in certain spots here and there and did what he did, but I don't think that was a true 2-quarterback system. And there was no doubt that JJ McCarthy was the clear cut, this is the guy. And we knew that from the time he stepped foot on campus. But when it comes to Alex Orji and Jack Tuttle, and again, I'm guessing how I think this is going to play out. I think Jack Tuttle is probably a more polished passer than Alex Orji is. That doesn't mean Jack Tuttle, to your point, can't run the ball. Jack Tuttle is also nimble enough to where he can make a defense pay with his legs. On the flip side, we know that Alex Orji does the majority of his damage with his legs. But there's a belief out there that he can't throw the ball, which is just categorically false. We've seen him throw the ball. We know he can complete passes. He is a quarterback at the Division I level at the University of Michigan. If you've still got it in your mind that, he's a running back, I've seen people suggest he should be a wide receiver.
Bullshit.
Like, stop doing that. So, but here's the thing. Even though I think Jack Tuttle is a more polished passer, I don't think he's the greatest passer in the world. And I'm not so sure that Alex Orji can do everything he needs to do through the air to be the definitive QB1. But I think both of them together could bring some unique aspects to the position that could make for a long day defensively if you're trying to figure out how to stop it. For instance, if Jack Tuttle's in the game, it doesn't necessarily signal a pass from Michigan. Like I said, he's mobile enough to hurt you with his legs. So a pass is on the table, a run is on the table, an RPO is on the table with Jack Tuttle in the game. You bring Alex Orji in, same case. Pass is on the table, run is on the table, RPO on the table. So you have two guys that you can sort of sub in and sub out who can do different things and have different strengths. But ultimately, I think that's going to keep a defense guessing and confuse them a little bit on why you're making these changes and who's coming in to do what. The other benefit I see is that, look, it's going to be a long season, and Michigan's got a lot of tough opponents on their roster. And I don't see anything wrong with having two guys that are getting quite a bit of reps on the field. If in the event, another thing that we've talked about previously, if Alex Orji is your QB1, if you plan on using him the same way, where he's going to run the ball a lot, he's going to take a lot of contact, he's going to get hit a lot, guess what's going to happen? Probably going to have nagging injuries, little things here and there that prevent him from being on the field. Jack Tuttle last year looked good in limited reps. I think he was like 15 of 17, like high completion percentage, but got hurt, got injured. And so if you can find a way to get both of these guys on the field and let them play to their strengths, I think it's going to put a defense in a tough spot. And I also think that in the event of a long season, a long Big Ten season, if something goes wrong with one of those guys, you've already got the other guy who's used to being on the field and playing within the offense, and you don't got to call him up and put all your hopes and dreams on whoever the second string guy is. So yeah, traditionally, I would prefer not to have a 2-quarterback system. I would prefer to have a JJ McCarthy on this roster, but I don't think JJ McCarthy is on this roster. I think you've got an experienced Jack Tuttle, who's more of a polished passer, and I think you've got Alex Orji, who can do a lot of damage with his legs. And the combination of those two guys on the field, who can provide a lot of different things to an offense, I think could take a Michigan offense that is like average and just okay and take it to the next level. That's my argument for why I would use both.
Yeah, I see what you're trying to say. And once again, if Jack Tuttle was a starting quarterback or Davis Warren, whoever, if it's not Alex Orji, I agree with you because I think you have to put Alex Orji on the field to utilize that dual threat ability, to use his legs. Yeah, he's only thrown one career pass, but obviously the guy can throw the football, or he wouldn't even be talked about as being the starting quarterback at Michigan. My biggest problem though is
we haven't seen it, but I want to ask you, do you think he can be everything Michigan needs through the air to be the solidified starting quarterback for the entire season? And I get it, we haven't seen it. Just what does your gut tell you?
I want to say yes, because I guess my thing is I trust the Michigan coaching staff. They've been around for the 3 years now that Michigan's done what it's done. And if they think that Alex Orji is that quarterback, Kirk Campbell, if he thinks Alex Orji is that quarterback, Chiron Moore, then I've got to think that he is too. And obviously he's being talked about as kind of the presumed starting quarterback right now at Michigan. And I realize that Jack Tuttle is getting a little bit more hype right now, and Davis Warren had his time in the light too with the coaching staff. But when you kind of going back to our last show, Alex Orji's everywhere. He's everywhere. The media gets to talk to Alex Orji all the time, and that means something. At Michigan, that means something. And yeah, man, I got to think that he could get the job done.
Yeah, and you know what my thoughts are on Alex Orji and what I think he can be. I've spent a lot of time on this show, preaching that he is the guy, he will be the guy. End of story. For anybody who criticized him, I'm coming after you, like that sort of thing. Like, I believe Alex Orji can be the guy. But I also am willing to acknowledge that there's a scenario where a 2-quarterback system could work very well for Michigan. We've seen it in years past. This isn't the Brady Henson sort of situation, but we saw Alex Orji come in spurts and do what he does well last year. The season before, or was it 2021? We saw Cade and JJ sort of splitting off reps, and JJ was able to come in. But I don't even think that was the same situation, because I genuinely think there was just one quarterback who was head and shoulders above. Like, I couldn't think of one thing that Cade McNamara did better than JJ McCarthy. He wasn't a better passer than JJ McCarthy. He wasn't a better runner than JJ McCarthy. It was clear to me JJ McCarthy was the better quarterback of the two. I'm not so sure that that's the case with Jack Tuttle and Alex Orji. I don't know that there's a clear-cut leader. This guy's better than this guy. I think one guy is, like I said, a more polished passer. I think another guy's a better runner. Does that mean Alex Orji can't throw the ball? No. Does that mean Jack Tuttle can't run it if he needs to? Absolutely not. So I'm not sure if the best thing to do is to rely on one guy or to try to find a way to utilize these two. But for anybody out there who says it can't work, I don't think that's the case. I see a scenario for sure. Matt Kirby says, lay off Cade, please. Look at, man.
What happens if we went out, huh?
Cade will be a Michigan legend in some people's mind forever. And I think that's justified. He was part of the team that helped the turnaround. But the reality is, Matt, you and I and everybody else with a set of eyes knew pretty early on that JJ McCarthy was the better quarterback of the two. And I'm just not so sure that we're going to get that from these two guys. Like I said, I think both guys excel at different things, and I can certainly see a scenario where you're utilizing, put it this way, it's the JJ McCarthy, Alex Orji situation like we saw last year, with a much, much heavier dose of Alex Orji, while also allowing him to throw the ball. That was, I guess, that's the thing that I found the most puzzling about the way they chose to utilize Alex Orji last year. Not once did he have the opportunity.
You knew what Michigan was doing when Alex Orji came into the game.
He came in and everybody knew what was happening, because it was the same damn time or same thing every time. Like, there wasn't even an option. He was going to pull it. He was going to take it. He was going to run it. Everybody knew it was coming, and they still had trouble stopping it. But it was a little bit puzzling to me that they didn't give him. I mean, shit, man. There were games where Michigan was blowing teams out left and right, and Alex Orji doesn't even get to throw the ball once. Not a single pass attempt.
I remember that game against Michigan State. They had all 4 quarterbacks in the game, and you have Jaden Denigal coming in, slinging it around. You had, I believe, Jack Tuttle came in. He threw some passes, and then you have.
Why wouldn't you allow him to throw some passes last season? What is the reasoning there?
I don't know. I mean, that was my question I had all of last season. Like, you watch the guy warm up. He's got a cannon. Like, he literally can throw the football. So yeah, why aren't you letting him throw the ball? Like, in that RPO situation, you want him to keep it every single time. Why? Like, what are you trying to hide there? So right. I agree. I do agree with you on that aspect. Like, what were they hiding, or what didn't they want people to see with Alex Orji?
Yeah, and maybe it's really, really good. Maybe it's not so good. I'm not sure. All I know is that Michigan had a sizable lead in multiple games last year, and they didn't give Alex Orji the opportunity to throw the ball once. To me, that's like, I don't know what to make of that. And I think we'll obviously get a better sense of that during fall camp and what happens there. And then obviously as the season kicks off in a little over a month. And, CJ says maybe he's a secret weapon. I'm not sure, but the hammer is coming.
I honestly could see Jim Harbaugh being that guy of, all right, when Alex Orji's in the game, he is not allowed to throw the football because we're hiding what he can do. He's going to be our starting quarterback next year, and we don't want any team to be able to scout him that he can throw the footbut. Like, I could see that being a Jim Harbaugh type of thing.
Potentially, but they certainly weren't trying to hide JJ McCarthy in 2021. I mean, dude rolled out to his right, turned, threw the ball all the way across the field, Jalen Baldwin against Western Michigan. And I think right from that spot, right from that pass, everybody knew, okay, how much longer are we going to do this thing with Cade before we make the change? And again, credit to Cade because he helped lead Michigan to a Big Ten championship and in the college football playoff, the winner over Ohio State. But everybody knew that it was JJ McCarthy. So, I'm not sure we're going to see that with Jack Tuttle and Alex Orji. I don't know that either guy is going to truly solidify themselves as the top quarterback, which is why I think we're going to see both frequently throughout the season. And I know that there's a lot of critics. I've seen it pop up. If you have two quarterbacks, you have none. I think it was John Madden that said that once. If you've got two quarterbacks, you really have none. I agree in 95% of the circumstances, but I do think there is a small set of circumstances where it actually could work to the advantage of an offense, and I think that this is one of those rare occasions. So maybe I'll be proven wrong, but my gut's telling me right now, I'd like to see Alex Orji be the guy and turn into everything that we think he can be, but I think we're going to see a pretty healthy dose of both of those guys during the fall, and I'm not necessarily sure that is a bad indication of where the offense might be. Listen, we're at an hour here. I don't want to spend too much time on this. We're at an hour 9. I've seen it. I don't know who this guy is, either a Spartan or an Ohio State fan. Says the hammer is coming. Trent, should we just address the hammer in the room, so to speak? I mean,
well, it's definitely in the room, so I think we probably should.
Listen, I think, of course, we're talking about there was I guess you can call it a report that came out today that, the NCAA is close to issuing its notice of allegations as it relates to Connor Stallions and the sign stealing issue and sort of what the NCAA is going to try to do there. I'll just pull up, let me read it. The report came from Chris Ballas of On3. And let me just read a little excerpt from one of, the publications that I pulled here. It says, according to Ballas's report, a source indicated that the NCAA could seek to ban Michigan from the postseason for 1 or 2 years. Michigan is expected to fight back against any postseason ban, and it's unlikely the ban would go into effect this year, as Michigan's appeal is unlikely heard by the NCAA's Committee on Infractions until 2025. Michigan's national championship and wins from the last 3 seasons are not expected to be vacated. So when I read that, Trent, I take that as there's just not a lot of information there. Like I don't think that's anything new that people already didn't know or already didn't suspect before. There's a lot of guessing, a lot of speculation. It might come tomorrow. It could come this week. The NCAA might try to do this. It doesn't sound like they might do that, but there's nothing definitive in any of these reports that have come out. But based on what I said, based on what I read there, I mean, initial thoughts, any sort of, what do you want to say about it? Because I know I have my thoughts on it, but I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I read Ballas's whole report there, and there was a lot of sources involved, and when he said Michigan will be ready to fight, of course they will. If the NCAA comes out and says that they're going to give Michigan a post ban, of course Michigan's going to do everything that it can to fight that and not get a postseason ban. What do we know? Absolutely nothing. We don't. There's a whole lot of speculation going on, and let's be honest, the whole 2020 recruiting COVID stuff that happened with Michigan just now got addressed. So once the NCAA sends the notice of allegations to Michigan has 30 to 60 days to respond. And then it could literally take years before this thing gets settled. I don't think there's anything to worry about right now for anybody involved. This thing is going to go out. It's going to take its time unless the NCAA gives Michigan a slap on the wrist. But if it's not a slap on the wrist, it's going to take a long time.
Yeah. Let's see. Brandon from the Facebook page says,
bullshit.
And I agree. Listen, and the thinker, I'm glad you're still in here. Not sure how true that title is, but he says there will be vacated wins, spelling error in there. No surprise there. Look, I think that's all you guys have. I think that's why, first of all, it's interesting to me, Trent, that all of a sudden, rival fans, whether you're a Michigan State fan or you're a Ohio State fan, all of a sudden now you're taking a Michigan beat reporter as gospel when you spend most of the year talking about how it's all bullshit that comes from the Michigan media.
Bullshit.
Now, all of a sudden, a report comes out that you find favorable and it's gospel. This is, the hammer is coming. Wins are going to be vacated. The clock is ticking for Michigan. You know why rival fans are holding on to what the NCAA might do so tightly? It's because it's the only thing they have to justify their failures over the last 3 years. They are desperately hoping that the NCAA will come in and be the savior and issue some sort of punishment, take Michigan's wins away, issue a postseason ban, which, by the way, I'm not even sure that the NCAA has any control over that, because if I remember correctly, when this first came out, wasn't there talk about how the NCAA and the college football playoff, those are two separate entities. I believe the playoff is an independent thing where a committee decides who the teams are that are going to participate. So regardless of what the NCAA decides to do, I don't think it's going to have much of an impact, if any, on what the college football playoff committee might decide to do, assuming that Michigan's in the hunt. But again, there is nothing in this report. There is nothing to grab onto. There's nothing to me that suggests that there's anything serious coming. I just think that the rush to judgment and the reason that this report is having the desired effect, I told that to you before we went live. I think it's, we're talking about it. Rival fans are talking about it. It's something that's getting shared, but I just didn't see a lot of information in there that led me to believe that anything is happening other than Michigan's going to get a notice of allegation sometime in the near future, something we already knew. And we already know that there's a process that plays out once that happens. The NCAA issues the notice of allegations. Then Michigan has the opportunity to respond. Then both sides go back and forth, and you have it to where, to your point, Trent, just now we're getting sort of insight into the notice of allegations from something that happened back in 2020. So I'm just not a big believer in necessarily what was reported. Not a believer, but I just don't really think there was anything in there. And I also want to say this before I pass it back to you. Let's just say, for argument's sake, let's just say that the people that are critics of Michigan, the people, Michigan is a dirty program. The hammer's coming. Wins are going to be vacated. This, and this. I can tell you as somebody, let me take off my my quote unquote reporter hat, even though I wear that pretty loosely here. As a fan of the program, I don't give a shit. I don't care in the slightest. They could issue a 2-year bowl ban. They could try to put an asterisk near whatever it is they want to do. They could try to take whatever they want off of paper. Trent, it doesn't mean a damn thing to me, because I still watched Michigan beat Ohio State's ass for 3 years in a row. I still got to watch firsthand Michigan go to the Big Ten championship. I still got to go to the Rose Bowl and watch Michigan whoop Alabama's ass. And I still got to watch Michigan win the national championship in 2023. There's not a damn thing that the NCAA can say or do or piece of paper they can issue that's going to change the enjoyment I've had from the last 3 years. And I think that's what those fans want. Ultimately, they want it to spoil what we've been able to enjoy over the last 3 years. And I'm here to tell you, it doesn't matter. It won't change how I feel about it a bit. I will still wear my national championship gear proudly wherever I go. Has zero impact on me.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think that the Ohio State fans, the Michigan State fans, people that just don't like Michigan, I don't think they actually care about what may or may not happen to Michigan in a year, 2 or 3 years from now. They want that national title vacated. They want every win from that 2023 season gone, just so they can go back on social media and put everything out there. Oh, we were right. We knew the hammer was coming. Like, you guys didn't win that fair, blah, blah, blah. That's all they care about. They literally do not care about what happens in a couple years from now. It's all about this last season, because they don't want to see Michigan succeed. And that's the bottom line.
Yeah. And Craig, to your point, and I think what I brought up before, the NCAA can't do shit about Michigan's title. That's a college football playoff title. The NCAA has nothing to do with that. So look, if you're one of those rival fans and you're hoping that the NCAA is going to come in and rescue you and sort of, give validity to all the conspiracy theories you've been floating around, like that's cool. But I'm here to tell you, I don't claim to represent Michigan fans as a whole, but I'm telling you right now, we don't care. We do not care what the NCAA is going to say, what they're going to do, regardless of what we think about the Connor Stallions thing, which I think is a whole separate issue altogether. There might be people like Paul Feinbaum and Pete Thamel, which are, two of the most unathletic people you will ever meet, that want to report on this and say it's a big deal. People who've actually played the game at a high level spent a lot of time during last season telling you that this is nothing. This shit goes on regularly, that you guys are making too much of a big deal out of it. The only people that happen to side with the people like Feinbaum and Pete Thamel happen to wear scarlet and gray back in the day on Saturdays, or, green and white, or whatever colors you used to rep. But by and large, most people who played the game at a high level understand that what Michigan is being accused of isn't a reason that you're going to lose by 22 in your own building. So again, if you're leaning on the NCAA to make you feel better about that, or 49-0 in your own building, if you think the NCAA is going to make you feel better about that, more power to you. Still going to wear my championship gear, still going to enjoy everything that happened over the last 3 years. There is nothing that is going to change that. Trent, that's where I stand on the issue. Anything you want to add to that before we get out of here, as we're approaching an hour and 20 minutes? My goodness.
I don't think I can. I think you laid everything out literally perfectly. Obviously, you're going to have a big portion of the Michigan fan base who will be distraught if Michigan, something bad would happen to Michigan, like a postseason ban or whatever. But going back to what everybody else is saying, I don't think that the NCAA can actually really do anything to the playoff committee wanting Michigan into the playoff. So it's kind of a lose-lose situation for the NCAA in that aspect.
I mean, the NCAA is slowly but surely becoming irrelevant. And hell, by the time they actually get to dealing with this matter, I've seen it before, the NCAA might not even be a thing. So who gives a shit? Issue notice of allegations, go down that road. Like I said before, Michigan fans don't care. It's not going to impact anything we've done. Before we get out of here, I will say this. Yes, we saw the locker rooms. I think it's incredible. I said this on Twitter, man. Dude, what they did in Schembechler Hall with the locker room and the facilities there, if you haven't seen it, Trent put out an article that shows photos of the updates. You got to go take a look at that thing. I mean, it's not just a locker room. They've got a barber shop in there, something I know nothing about, but Trent, you can relate to that. They got a barber shop in there. Another thing Trent can relate to, they got bowling lanes in there.
Absolutely.
Pool table, a gaming station. Like there was no detail that was missed in what they did in Schembechler Hall. I think it's incredible, and I think it's fitting for national champions. By the way, they got a lot of trophies in that room too. National championship trophy, the Paul Bunyan trophies in there, celebrating wins over Ohio State. So, yeah, I think what they did there is incredible, and we'll just leave it at that, Trent. I mean, hell of a show. I thought it might suck. I think it was a good show. Great involvement from the people in the comments section. We are getting close to the beginning of the football season, just a month away. We got a press conference tomorrow with a couple of assistants, so we'll be bringing you more content there. But again, appreciate you guys as always. Appreciate even the rival fans that stopped in here to talk a little shit. Always love that. And we'll catch you next Monday. Trent, appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Thanks. Hour 22 minutes.
Woo.
Solid show.
It's a record.